the person is revealing the name of the person who is missing in that shorter chain. فعلم أن حديث الثقة كان منقطعا لا متصلا. If they didn't meet in the shorter chain, then you can know that there's inqita' in that the shorter sanad, and therefore you would not weaken the longer sanad. وإلا فمتى كان معنعنا مثلا ترجحت الزيادة. So he says that if it is mu'an'anan, it's related and transmitted with the word an, and then he uses the word mathalan. So why he use the word mathalan? It can include mu'annanan. So that's when they use the word anna fulanan qal, and likewise it can also include the word qala. So that's why that falls under the ambit of mathalan. Like Mullah al-Qari explains, if متى كان الإسناد بلفظ عن فلان مثلا أي ونحوه مما يحتمل عدم الاتصال ترجحت الزيادة. So if they do not use clear words, then the longer chain will be preferred, and the shorter chain in that case will most probably be considered as mudallas. So we're talking about Jami' al-Tahsil. Alama Alayhi rahmallah, he explained that if you have to really look that if you have, now in those times we are going to do towards the later in this kitab about Sanadul Ali and Sanadul Nazil. In those times, scholars and muhaddithun would try their best to get a shorter sanad, and they would always try to narrate what they, you talk about the Thulathiyat of Bukhari, etc. They always try to narrate what? Shorter Asānīd. So, Al-Mazīd says that now when he's coming and he's adding an additional narrator, he knows that others are narrating it with a shorter chain, so it wouldn't be sensible for him to narrate it longer, because even in his time, the students wouldn't want that narration with a longer chain when they can get it with a shorter chain. So there's no real benefit in adding a narrator. وحاصل الأمر أن الراوي متى قال عن فلان ثم أدخل بينه وبينه في ذلك الخبر واسطة، فالظاهر أنه لو كان عنده عن الأعلى لم يدخل الواسطة إذ لا فائدة في ذلك، وتكون الرواية الأولى مرسلة إذا لم يعرف الراوي بالتدليس. So it's either going to be, mursal, we explain, it comes in the meaning of munqati'. So there's either going to be inqita' or there will be tadlis if they were from the same era. So in that case, you are rejecting the shorter sanad. You are rejecting the shorter sanad and you're giving preference to the longer sanad if they use words as an. But if they use words of sama or words which denote upon ittisal, then it will mean that those who are narrating it with the longer sanad, with the additional narrator, they are the ones who are making the mistake. فَالزِّيَادَةُ حِينَئِذٍ مُرَادِفُ الْغَلَطِ وَالصَّحُ خَارِجٌ عَمَّا يُقَالُ مِنْ أَنَّ زِيَادَةَ الثِّقَةِ مَقْبُولَةٌ. So therefore, then you cannot apply the principle that it's زِيَادَةُ الثِّقَةِ, etc. Because now it's this person who's narrating with a longer chain, he is making a mistake, because he knows that he can narrate it with a shorter chain. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah did not present any example for this here. That's all that he mentioned about it. Mullah al-Qari, he gave the same example which Allama ibn Salah rahmallah gave in his Muqaddimah. He's still going to do it. So he said that مثاله ما روي عن عبد الله بن المبارك قال حدثنا سفيان عن عبد الرحمن بن يزيد بن جابر قال حدثني بصر بن عبيد الله قال سمعت أبا إدريس يقول سمعت واثلة بن الأسقع. So this is just to train you to hear Asānīd. When you go sit with some of the most senior muhaddithun, then you will see that they just mention, when they talk about Asānīd, and they just mention everything verbally. No, if you go by Sheikh Awama and you're going to, for example, he's not going to draw for you on a paper. He's going to just speak verbally. Like that, if you go to any of the senior muhaddith, even if you go to the madaris in which takhassus is taught, they just mention everything verbally because this is how it was all the time. So you have to sharpen your mind. So it's no use that because you're doing it online, so now we must make for you a shajara and make for you and make a table and show you how the synergy of your mind must be sharp. That you must be able to grasp these narratives, how it was always. And still today, if people, there are so many thousands of people who can follow when Asānīd are being mentioned. So if they can all do it, then you can also do it. And like that, even when we quote the Arabic text, It mustn't happen that we're quoting the Arabic and then it's all flying over your head and causing you to lose concentration. Technically to go faster, it makes more sense that I just give you the gist of everything in English. However, when the Australian Mashayikh told me to teach online, then he said it's fine that I must quote the Arabic. And then I thought about it and I thought, yes, that it doesn't mean that because it's online, so now I must just make it go faster and quote the English. You have to train yourself. Because again, if you go sit with any of the senior Mashayikh in Ḥadīth, they're just going to quote the Arabic. In fact, they're going to be talking to you in Arabic, most of them. So that's why you need to follow. But actually, having said that, someone contacted me to ask to teach this Nuzha again. Obviously, I don't think I will, but they're insisting. Actually, they learned about all of these durus because they said one of you put it as a status on social media. They didn't mention who, but whoever it was, may Allah Ta'ala reward you. Jazakallah for that. So they're insisting that I teach them again. So if we do teach them again, then because we're paying someone to type out the notes. So in that case, all the notes will be typed out. So then maybe we'll just make for Nuzha, but never ever for Muqaddamah ibn Salah make tables and stuff like that. So nevertheless, the chain goes like this here. So now try to picture it yourself and try to sharpen your mind and strengthen your mind to be able to follow when Asānīd are verbally said. So it goes Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, and he's quoting from Sufyan, who's quoting from so you can see that this narrator Sufyan, so keep in mind, Abdullah ibn Mubarak is narrating from Sufyan. Then, the link above Sufyan is Abdurrahman ibn Yazid, and then Busr bin Ubaidullah. Now, after Busr bin Ubaidullah, there is a narrator Abu Idris, and then it's Wathila bin Asqa, and then Abu Marthad al-Ghanawi. So there are 7 narrators to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Mullah Ali Qari says that there are errors which go via Abdullah ibn Mubarak. So via Abdullah ibn Mubarak means that one is a student of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. So someone below Abdullah ibn Mubarak done it, and then he quoted it in the sanad of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. That's the one mistake, and the other mistake is of Abdullah ibn Mubarak himself. فذكر سفيان وأبي إدريس في هذا زيادة وهم. So I told you to take note of Sufyan, the teacher of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. So putting the name Sufyan there, it's a mistake because there's no Sufyan. So that's on Al-Mazīd fi Muttṣil Al-Asānīd. But that's a mistake of a student of Abdullah ibn Mubarak. And then between these two, so the 4th narrator and the 6th narrator, you have Abu Idris, the 5th narrator. So there, وَأَمَّا أَبُو إِدْرِيسَ فَنُسِبَ الْوَهْمُ فِيهِ إِلَى ابْنِ الْمُبَارَكِ. There, the mistake is attributed to Abdullah ibn Mubarak. لأن جماعة من الثقات رووه عن ابن جابر عن بصر عن واثلة. Because there's many thiqa narrators. So remember that مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهَا أَتْقَنْ. So I told you that at times you give preference to number. Because if you know Abdullah ibn Mubarak and his status, so here jama'atan is the key word. لأن جماعة من الثقات. There's a group. So a group is a strength. A group of others have narrated it with Jabir is narrating from Busr, and then it's going directly Busr to Wathila. There is no Abu Idris in the middle. So that is Mazīd fi Muttṣil Al-Asānīd. فوهم ابن المبارك وظن أن هذا مما رواه عن واثلة. So the mistake is of Ibn al-Mubarak. In fact, Imam Muslim rahimahullah is the one who narrated it with the addition of Abu Idris. And now, in Sahih Muslim, the order of the narrations and all of that when you're doing Sahih Muslim, the Ustad explained. So nevertheless, he narrated there, so the student of Abdullah ibn Mubarak there is Hasan ibn Rabi' al-Bijli. So he mentions it, and then it goes on Busr ibn Ubaidullah, an Abi Idris al-Khawlani. So the point to take note is it's narrated with the word an. So an Abi Idris al-Khawlani, an Wathilah ibn al-Asqa, an Abi Marthad al-Ghanawi. And then the narration, لا تصلوا إلى القبور ولا تجلسوا عليها. So it's narrated in Sahih Muslim. You might think just because it's narrated in Sahih Muslim, it is authentic. However, others narrated it with the Busr, quoting directly from Wathila, as we mentioned, that the Jama'ah, great group, so they dropped off Abu Idris in the middle. And then there are actually clear words of Sama between Busr and Wathil. Obviously, the first condition was, from what we mentioned in the beginning, that we will only look further into it if Busr actually met Wasila. So in this case, yes, he did meet Wasila. So since he met Wasila, we know now there's no inqita' in the sanad. So now we find that here there is actually words where Busr is mentioning very clearly that he heard it. So if you go in Sunan Abi Dawud, then there it comes that عن بصر بن عبيد الله قال سمعت واثلة بن الأسقى يقول سمعت أبا مرثد الغنوي يقول قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تجلسوا على القبور ولا تصلي إليها. That you can see it's very very short. In fact, we quote the sanad of Sunan Abi Dawud. So alhamdulillah, we are very fortunate to get one of the very shortest sanad in the world. I told you earlier about if I narrated to you what the whole sanad would be like the shortest. But it's also a discussion on whether the same applies in today's times and whether you should go. You do it, you get shorter Asānīd through accidental meeting. So sometimes you go and you meet a sheikh, and now in sitting with him, you tell him to give you Ijāzah. In that way, you get, you don't make it a priority. This is what Sheikh Awama says. So, the many scholars, they pointed out that this mistake, that it's actually, it is like this here, Busr bin Ubaidullah was narrating from Wathilah ibn al-Asqa, and to put Abu Idris in the middle is a mistake. وقد حكم الأئمة البخاري وغيره على ابن المبارك بالوهم فيها. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, etc. So with regards to Imam Bukhari, Imam Tirmidhi is the one who narrated it in his Jami' Tirmidhi. He narrated the entire sanad and this hadith, and then after it he said, قال Muhammad, that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah said, وحديث ابن المبارك خطأ, that the narration of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak is a mistake. أخطأ فيه ibn al-Mubarak, that Ibn al-Mubarak is the one who made the mistake. وزاد فيه عن أبي إدريس الخولاني, and he added this narrator, Abu Idris al-Khawlani, and thereafter he explained how it is mentioned correctly. About a few lessons back, we spoke about the ilal of Imam Dar Qutni. So they also, he mentioned, وَالْمَحْفُوظ مَا قَالَهُ الْوَلِيدِ وَمَنْ تَابَعَهُ عَنِ ابْنِ جَابِرٍ لَمْ يَذْكُرْ أَبَا إِدْرِيسِ فِيهِ. So he, Imam Dar Qutni rahimahullah, he also mentioned that the mistake there, he mentions all the others. فرواه الوليد بن مسلم وسرقة بن خالد وبكر بن يزيد الطويل ومحمد بن شعيب وأيوب بن سويد وغيرهم عن ابن جابر. So he narrated all of them, but none of them, like I told you, individually, none of them can compare with Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak overpowers all of them, is greater than all of them. And that's why when explaining the word atqan, I told you that it even refers to a greater group. Likewise, Abu Hatim rahimahullah, he also pointed this out. His son says, قال أبي, that my father said that أن ابن المبارك وهم في هذا الحديث أدخل أبا إدريس الخولاني بين بصر بن عبيد الله وبين واثلة. So I quoted to you three scholars because of a objection which could arise. That the objection could arise that if you have clear words of Sama' between Busr bin Ubaidullah and Wathilah ibn al-Asqa, as it was quoted, and then there are also clear words between Busr ibn Ubaidullah and from Abu Idris. If you got Mullah al-Qari's commentary, if you open it, you will see that he mentions it there with clear words of Sama' on page 478. حدثني بصر بن عبيد الله قال سمعت أبا إدريس يقول سمعت واثلة بن الأسقى. So since Busr is clearly mentioning that سمعت أبا إدريس, and the sanad is authentic. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, obviously you know his status, and then Sufyan, Abdurrahman ibn Yazid, and Busr on the bare minimum on the conditions of Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So why can't you say that Busr heard it from both? He heard it from Abu Idris and he heard it from Wathilah. And this happens very often, that sometimes a person will hear from a student. Maybe a few years later, he manages to travel to the region of the sheikh, or maybe bumps into the sheikh at Hajj, or maybe, and then he hears it directly from the sheikh. So he heard it from the student also, from an intermediary, and then to the sheikh, and he also heard it directly from the sheikh. So why can't we say that it is the case here? Why are we just saying that Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak made a mistake? So Mullah al-Qari acknowledged that people could bring objections like this. فإن قيل إن كان السند الخالي عن الزايد بلفظ عن احتمل يكون مرسلا، وإن كان بلفظ السماع ونحوه احتمل يكون سمعه مرة عن رجل عنه ثم سمعه منه فلا يتحقق الوهم. That at times you can say maybe he heard it from a student and then from the sheikh, and maybe at another stage in his life he heard it directly from the sheikh. So to respond to that, Mullah al-Qari rahmallah says, فَالْجَوَابِ أَنَّ الظَّاهِرْ مِنْ مِثْلِ هَذَا يَذْكُرَ السَّمَاعَيْنِ. That apparently in these kind of situations, the person will clearly mention that I heard it from from someone else and then from the Sheikh, and he will also outline that I also did hear it directly from the Sheikh. فَلَمَّا لَمْ يَذْكُرْهُمَا حُمِلَ عَلَى الزِّيَادَةِ. In this case, he didn't mention it. So now linking it to our example here, Radiyuddin ibn al-Hanbali in Al-Fur' al-Atīth, he says, وَأَمَّا احْتِمَالَ يَكُونْ بَصْرَ بْنُ عُبَيْدِ اللَّهِ قَدْ سَمِعَهُ مِنْ أَبِي إِدْرِيسَ عَنْ وَاثِلَةٍ ثُمَّ لَقِيَ وَاثِلَةً. That first he heard it from Abu Idris, from the student of Wathila, and quoted it from him. ثُمَّ لَقِيَ وَاثِلَةً. After that he maybe met Wathila, فَسَمِعَهُ مِنْهُ, and then he heard from him a mubashara. فقد أجيب عنه بأن الظاهر ممن وقع له مثل هذا ذكر السماعين. That the person would mention clearly that he heard it from both. So that's the one. Furthermore, there is a qarina here to show us there is an outer factor which we are looking at, which clearly shows us that he made a mistake. And that is what Abu Hatim rahmallah mentioned. That Ibn Abi Hatim says, قال أبي بصر قد سمع من واثلة وكثيرا ما يحدث بصر عن أبي إدريس. That if you look, Busr, he did meet Wathila, but many times, most of the narrations which he narrates from Wathila, he always quotes it via Abu Idris. So very seldom he will quote from Wathila directly. Majority of what he quotes, he always mentions first that Abu Idris mentioned it to me from Wathila. فغلط ابن المبارك فظن أن هذا مما روي عن أبي إدريس. So Ibn al-Mubarak made the mistake and thought that just like how all his other narrations, he narrated from Abu Idris and then quotes from Wathila, in the same way, yeah, that he narrating, he heard it from others, he heard it from Abu Idris, and then that's how he is narrating it from Wathila. So this is the point which Sheikh Wajiuddin al-Gujarati mentioned. He said, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَرَّحَ بِسْمَا بَصْرَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَاثِلَةٍ وَالْقَرِينَةُ الدَّالَّةُ عَلَى الْوَهْمِ. That here, we are not just saying that Ibn al-Mubarak made the mistake just because of no other reason. There is a concrete thing to show us. There's a concrete reason to show us that the possible reason why he made the mistake. So then he quotes this here from Abu Hatim. But now, you remember when we were speaking about it, like I said in lesson 72, then we mentioned that Allama Khatib rahmallah wrote on the subject. So Allama ibn Salah rahmallah criticized him and said, وَفِي كَثِيرٍ مِمَّا ذَكَرَهُ نَظْرٌ. His kitab is now no more available, so therefore we cannot refer back to his kitab and see it. So, but we trust Ibn Salah rahmallah. Ibn Salah rahmallah is saying that in many of the examples which Allama Khatib mentioned in his kitab on Al-Mazīd fi Muttṣil al-Asānīd, he said that in most of them will be incorrect. Why? لأن الإسناد الخالي عن الراوي زائد إن كان بلفظ عن في ذلك فينبغي يحكم بإرساله ويجعل معللا بالإسناد الذي ذكر فيه الزاهد. So you can see he's mentioning that many times when only the word an was used, Imam Allama Khatib considered that also to be from Mazīd fi Muttṣil al-Asānīd, but we clearly mentioned that there must be words of Sama, Yaqad, Tasrih, Bis-Sama. So we cannot go back to that kitab. Quickly now to come to the conclusion of this here, like we said, the precise way of mentioning the ruling is to say that there is no standard ruling. You remember when you were talking about Ziyadatul Thiqah, then we mentioned there is no standard ruling, and every case will have to be evaluated separately. So that's the exact same thing which takes place here. That there is no standard ruling. Why? Because every time you're going to find this qarina. Lakin, Mullah al-Qari mentions, lakin tarajjaha janibul hazfi biqarinatin dallatin ala al-wahm. At times you will give preference to the longest. And al-Malaqani, he mentioned, وَهَذَا كُلُّهُ مَا لَمْ تَقُمْ قَرِينَةٌ تَدُلُّ عَلَى وَهْمٍ مِنْ زَادَ فِي الرَّاوِي الَّذِي زَادَهُ وَإِلَّا فَلَا كَلَامَ فِي تَقْدِيمِ النَّاقِصِ عَلَيْهِ. So basically, for every narration, it will be judged. The general ruling is that it will be rejected. But every narration will have to be judged separately and independently. That brings us to the end of the chapter. Until Thursday, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.